All right, my name is Chad Stone. I don't have a typical story, in my opinion. I've never been to jail. I've never been to prison. I don't have tattoos. I don't have scars all over my arms. I owned a business. I've been married. I paid my bills. I would consider myself at one time to have had a normal life. Throughout my early 20s, I started to dabble with drugs as far as smoking weed, drinking, doing cocaine on occasion. 19, I didn't touch anything. I was an athlete growing up. And the thing was, nothing majorly got me hooked or off and running or, doing some of the stupid stuff we hear about or read about in newspapers. The thing was, I got an injury at 27 and I had never taken any kind of pain pills up to that point in my life, and the doctor gave me Percocets and Vicodin, and I took those for 2 years as prescribed. Increasingly going up, my tolerance would increase, and I was introduced to Oxycontin, my tolerance went up even quicker and more so, and they quit making the Oxycontin that I was used to taking at one point. And this was a common theme I've heard in a lot of people in addiction, is they were given a certain type of pill through a doctor. Their tolerance went up, the doctor cut them off. When the tolerance goes up and you're only given a certain amount for 30 days, well, that is only going to last you 15 or 10. Then you're starting to get into selling them to support a habit, and it's a never-ending downward spiral. So at 2008, at my peak of pills, I was on 1080s a day. 1080s, enough to kill a horse, and an 8-ball of cocaine with a gambling problem, and I'm still married and I have my financial life in order as far as a business, my wife in place, cars, I have money in the bank. I don't think my life is screwed up. I just think I got to get off these pills a little bit. That was my thinking. And the problem is not the pills or the heroin that we're dealing with now, the crack, the cocaine, it is our thinking, period. If it wasn't heroin, it would be something else. There will be another drug in another 5 years that gets you crazily high, and that's going to be the new epidemic. And it's sad, but it's true. The further we get from God, the worse it is going to get. Our society in general thinks it's cool now to socially drink, break the law, and get high. We glorify it instead of putting it down and saying it's not what we should do. We actually glorify it now. In movies, sometimes even in press and things of that nature, people think it's cool to have a record. People think it's cool to break the law now. That is not normal. It's just not normal. That is twisted thinking. That is the root of our problem. So I go through Glen Bay 2008. I get off the pills. I think as long as I don't take the pills, I'm okay. I went to drinking. Okay, went to drinking Patron because I still had to put something in me. I used for the effect. I need to put something in me. And originally when I started the pills for the injury, I didn't use those to get high. I want to point that out. I took those as prescribed, but the doctor, when he gave them to me, said don't mix them with alcohol. So I didn't. I was fearful that my heart would stop and other things, because you can kill yourself mixing pills and alcohol together. It's a common death rate. So I didn't drink. I took the pills, but I did not know how my body would react to these pills. And it went increasingly from 2 Percocets every 4 hours to, as I said at the end, 1080s of Oxycontin a day, which is the equivalent of taking probably like 50 Percocets a day. It was mind-blowing. When I went into the doctor, my triglyceride count was a walking heart attack waiting to happen in the 700s. My liver was on the verge of failure. I was also hooked on steroids and other things, which you can't do anything, especially in recovery. Those things are to do nothing but hurt you. We're not put on this earth to get high till we die, drunk till we are belligerent or don't know what's going on. Steroids are not the answer either. And I was on everything. I was literally a walking chemical factory. I got off the pills, went to drinking. Drinking didn't make me feel any better. I had to drink to go enjoy. But as soon as the alcohol wore off, I was still miserable. I was always miserable. And I had tons of money. I had a beautiful wife. I had the son, the white picket fence, 2 dogs. I had the life that we all hope we want. But when I got that life, I still was miserable and I couldn't figure out why. I was introduced to heroin when the pills that I needed quit being made. It was 2009, 2010. I was introduced to it, started snorting heroin. That took care of the opiate withdrawal. That's all I took it for. Opiate withdrawal is horrible. It is like a flu times 10. You wake up sick, and you will feed that until it goes away. And people look at addiction, or people that are hooked on drugs and alcohol, especially drugs, as bad people. If you've never experienced opiate withdrawal, it is the only thing we can think about until we get it taken care of. It literally owns us. If we have bills to pay, children to take care of, an event to go to, if we are in withdrawal, that is our only thought until it is taken care of. And we are violently sick until it's taken care of. And we can't stop once we get to a certain point. There is a solution, which I'll get to eventually, but the fact is that is our only driving force when we are in active addiction, and it will be fed any which way possible. And I hate to say it, some people break the law, some people steal, but that is why they're doing that. They're not doing it because they want to steal. They want to quiet the urge, the withdrawal of that drug. And started snorting heroin. I got into IBH in 2012. I knew I had a problem. I was briefly introduced to the needle, the dreaded needle we all talk about and hear about. Oh, he's a junkie now. Fact is, it's just a quicker way to get it in your system, a quicker way to feel it. Yes, it's dirtier looking than just snorting it. I mean, it's all the same to me, okay? I got into IBH. I stayed there 114 days. I thought I could just have dry time under my belt. I just need to get away from the drugs. I need to get away from the drinking. I just don't need to do anything and I'm good. And the problem again was I didn't fix the problem. Part of the problem is my thinking. The main problem I'll get into near the end. I leave and I'm more miserable. 114 days, I have nothing in my body, nothing in my system, and I am a walking miserable mess because my solution going in there was drugs and alcohol. That was my solution, to feel good, to deal with stress, to get through the day. When I don't have that solution, I'm miserable. It could be a sunny day and I got a day at Cedar Point paid for and we're going to a casino later, or I have a hot date with a beautiful woman. I'm miserable because I don't have what's in me. And what I like is the effects caused by the dopamine release. What happened throughout my 20s is I released so much dopamine synthetically through drugs and alcohol, I couldn't naturally produce it anymore. I couldn't figure out why. I'm always miserable without drugs and alcohol. My body wanted synthetic dopamine release caused by drugs and alcohol, and when I didn't have that in my body, I was miserable. It's that simple. I couldn't naturally produce it anymore because I freaking zapped all the receptors in my brain that were able to actually enjoy life and have that dopamine release. They just came out with a study yesterday too that there's a forgiveness therapy which says if we reminisce on self-pity and depression and resentments, that our body will shut down the dopamine release, which is almost the same thing as the 12-step recovery program that I actually did, where we get rid of that stuff and then we're able to produce it again. When I came out, it says that if we don't solve the problem, which is our spiritual malady, a lack of a God conscious, a relationship with God, and look at ourselves and fix our thinking and have a psychic change necessary to recover from this hopeless state of mind and body, which you can recover, but there is one way. I've tried methadone, Suboxone, Subutex, I've tried tapering off, I've tried going back to pills, going back to meth, crack, and everything else. Narcan and all these other programs through the city, through the state, through the federal government do not work. They're a Band-Aid on a bullet wound for one reason and one reason only. As soon as they don't have that, if they get locked up, if they go on a vacation, if for some reason their insurance runs out, their money runs out, and they don't have what they need, they're immediately going to have that mental obsession. The mental obsession is your brain telling us, I want more dopamine release. I want more dopamine release. And it will not stop until we put something in us that releases that dopamine, and then they're off and running again. It doesn't solve the problem. It just quiets the urge. It's not the answer. I understand parents that want their kids on that stuff rather than die of heroin overdoses. I understand all that. I have a 7-year-old son, and God forbid he'd ever get hooked on heroin or any of these other drugs. I understand that point of view, but it's not the long-term answer. It's a short-term answer to a long-term goal, a lifetime goal of not having to put anything in us and go about our day happy, joyous, and free is the answer, the only answer I have found. And I've gone through every program the city of Akron, Summit County, and surrounding areas has to offer. None of them worked. That stuff they give you is your temporary God, basically. If you don't go get it that morning, you're screwed. And that's all you can think about until you get something or that back in you. So I leave, my wife shows up, I'm still married, but she doesn't like me, she's not living with me, and she showed up with another man. And I freaked out, and my way of coping with that still, okay, I had dry time, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't using, for about a year period after I got out of IBH, was to go get high again. I didn't want to feel what I just seen, her with another man. That's our way of coping with life, unless we're in recovery and learn a new way to cope with life. That's my way of coping with it, is I want to get out of me. I don't want to feel, I want to numb this pain. Off and running again. Ironically, it got me, and it's a blessing, got me back into IBH. I begged to get back into IBH again because I knew I did not work the 12-step program that they told me I needed to work. I didn't get a sponsor, and I didn't work on my relationship with God, because the answer is through the 12 steps, establishing a relationship with God. We are living on self-will. We are putting something in us on a regular basis to make us feel good. That's our way of coping with life. And when we get to a certain point, we can't stop that. The answer is living for God. There's 2 dogs to feed. I'm feeding me, not living for God. There is no in-between solution, and if some people don't like God, well, you know what? That's the answer to our problem. And again, the further we get from God, whether it's through the state, the city, the federal government, the more we take God away from us, the worse the problem's going to get. The problem is we do not have good morals and values in our area anymore. We have people that are growing up thinking it's normal to smoke weed, to do drugs, because they see their parents doing it. They glorify it in movies and TV. Everywhere you see, it's cool to get high, to break the law, to drink, and do all those other things. And our children are growing up thinking that's normal. It's not normal, okay? I'm sorry, when I was in my 10, 15 year range back in the late 80s, 90s, it was just starting then. There was just talk of smoking crack and a little bit of weed. Look at it now. It's progressively gotten worse, and it ain't getting any better anytime soon. This video hopefully helps one person, 10 people, the whole city. I don't know who it would help. I hope it would help someone. Let's let them know there is a way out of this, but it's only going to get worse. It's not going to get better. The more we get away from God and remove ourselves from God, the worse it's going to get. I got back into IBH and I worked the 12 steps. Point blank simple, I did not want to work the 12 steps. I'm not supposed to say which fellowship. I don't need to say which fellowship, because the 12 steps are the 12 steps. It doesn't matter which fellowship you think you should belong to. The problem is we all have gone so far this way away from God. That's our way of dealing with life. We don't pray to God. We don't use God in our lives. We don't seek out God. We don't use Him for comfort. We don't live for God, have morals, values, nothing. It's demoralization of character to the extreme. And the fact is, anyone, I know there's people out there where I'm not an addict, I'm not an alcoholic. If you use drugs or drink long enough, you're going to get physically addicted. You're going to then get mentally addicted. And then you're going to do anything you can to support your habit. It's that simple. I don't care who you are. I don't care how strong-willed you think you are. Eventually, it's going to grab you and take you if you do it long enough. Some people, right from the rip, they're hooked. Some people, it might take a couple years. Some people might take 20 years. But eventually, if you do something long enough, your body gets physically addicted to it and then mentally addicted to it. It talks about it in our book. That's just a fact, period. I've talked to doctors about what actually happened when I couldn't stop, and it is the dopamine release that my brain wants more of. And I'd go through detox. I went through detox 8 times, the ADM, which there is a way to go into ADM for free. If there's a problem and you want to get off heroin, other drugs, you got to go through the process, but it's free. Thank God there's a place to go that's free. ADM, St. Thomas Hospital. 8 times I'd go there, I'd stay there the whole time. Within a day and a half, all my brain wanted to do was use drugs. And I finally am like on the 8th time, what is going on? I talked to the doctor. Your brain wants dopamine. It's that simple. It's not wanting the drug, it's wanting the effect caused by the drug. And my drug just happened to be the one that got me there quicker, which near the end was heroin. The problem is some people get dry time under their belt, they're using it with fentanyl, and they're using more than they should be, and they're dropping. I know 104 people now that have died. Probably 90 of the 104 were heroin overdoses since 2012 being introduced into the program of recovery. When I went through IBH the second time, I got down to the root of my problem, working the 12 steps, realizing I can't stop no matter how much I think I can. The powerlessness of step 1. My life's unmanageable, yeah. When my $100, I wake up, 90 of that is for drugs, 5 of it is for food, $2 is for gas, and $2 of it is for my pocket in case I needed a couple more dollars for something. That's the unmanageable part. Or when I don't have it, it's all I think about. My life was completely unmanageable at that point in my life. I finally worked step 2, understanding I can't restore myself to sanity, only God can. Step 3, turning my will and my life over to the care of God. Well, guess what? God's will for me was not to get high till I die, get drunk till I die, hurt my family, ruin a marriage, ruin my son, and push everyone away, losing their trust, their love for me, and being basically a walking zombie on this earth. My mom didn't have me and then say, I hope he grows up to be a drug addict that steals, manipulates, and hurts people. That was not what God's will for me was on this earth. Ironically, I think it's now to help as many people as possible according to the 12-step of recovery, because I'm not supposed to, it's like Fight Club. I'm not allowed to talk about Fight Club, okay? If it helps someone, I personally don't care. I would love to tell the world, but I've talked to people. Don't tell them what that. That's all, you know what, I don't care about that stuff, but I'm going to respect their wishes so I don't hear it tomorrow. The fact is, the 4th step, the 5th step, the 6th step, the 7th step, you self-analyze yourself. You look at your fears, your resentments, your harms to others, and your sex conduct, which everything was there. I was full of resentments and full of self-pity. Resentment held on too long enough, you become self-pity. Pity me, pity me. You reminisce on depression, your fears. I was fear-driven. My 3 biggest fears in 2008 was my company's going to go under due to the economy tanking. So I used more drugs to cope with that fear, which ironically, that money for the drugs would have paid the bills and I wouldn't have went under. My second biggest fear is my wife's going to leave me due to my heavy drug use. So I used more drugs to cope with that fear, and ironically she left. And my biggest fear of all was that my poor little son would grow up in a divorced household the way I did, because it sucked growing up in a divorced household. A non-traditional, dysfunctional family is what I grew up in, and 90% of drug addicts do grow up in non-traditional, dysfunctional families. There's got to be some kind of connection there. That's a whole nother topic. My wife took my son and left, and my 3 biggest fears, ironically, I created. I had those fears, I used out of those fears, ironically, I created those fears and made them actually happen, which just put me in a bigger downward spiral at that point in my life. The 5th step, I tell God, I admit it to my sponsor, another person, the exact nature of my wrongs. And for the first time, I was able to see myself how I was as a person, how I was treating people, and how drugs and alcohol affected my life greatly, and how I hurt everyone around me. When we're in active addiction and all we can think about is taking that opiate withdrawal away, we don't think of who we're hurting. The mothers that are up worrying late at night. The wives that are wondering when we're coming home, worrying if we're ever coming home. Our children, where's my daddy? I just want to spend time with them. I was incapable of being a husband, being a father, being a son, being the person that God wanted me to be and they were wanting me to be. I was incapable of it, because when that drug is calling, that's the only thing on your mind, literally. I grew up in the church. God forgive me of my sins. Okay. He forgives me of my sins. I was unaware of them. 6 and 7, after you do 4 and 5, you basically are finally aware of your sins and how you treat people and how you've hurt people, and you ask God to forgive you of your sins, shortcomings, character defects. The original wording in that program is sins. They took the word sins away to not push people away that don't like religion. But the fact is, I was made aware of my sins, my character defects, and I was ready to have God remove them. And I humbly on my knees asked him to, just like, I know it sounds like kind of going to church, but the fact is, the answer is God. This is just another way to get to him from a hopeless state of mind and body. 8, I had a list of people I needed to make right the wrongs in my life. 9 was the amends process, which I did. I went to every family member, my wife, people I hated, people I didn't want to make amends to, and I went to them first because I made a decision to do this program to the best of my ability because I had to see if it worked. I did. It worked. It's changed my life. It's changed the life of my ex-wife, my son, my family, my friends. My son's growing up with a father now. My son was growing up without a father before. I was there. I was a walking zombie. I was unable to emotionally attach myself to my son in any way or make any kind of good, positive, rational decision whatsoever. He has a father today due to this program. My ex-wife and I, believe it or not, get along cordially. Cordial adults that are doing what is ever best for our son. My father, 77, hasn't had a son for 37 years. I've just been there. He's got a son now. My stepmom and I get along, believe it or not. And her and I butted heads for a hell of a long time. I love that woman. That woman takes care of my father, helps me out, takes care of my son. Greatly appreciate her. My mom has her son back. It's that simple. This program has given the relationships I was incapable of having back in my life. Step 11 and 10. Not getting into a regular pattern of my old lifestyle, my old behaviors, my old thought process, and righting them immediately. Step 11 is seeking out God through prayer and meditation. Basically loving the Lord thy God with all our heart, soul, and mind. Just different wording. A lot of people don't want to look at it that way. That is the reality of it. And then going and loving my neighbor as I love myself. The 2 greatest commandments in the Bible. I'm going and carrying a message now to other alcoholics, drug addicts, whoever's suffering. I don't care if it's alcohol, drugs, gambling, women, sex. You eat dirt, and that's your way of coping with life. If you've got a problem, there is a solution through a 12-step program, and 330-541-7051. That's my number. I don't care who you are. You call me, I will help. That is my job now on this earth, is to be a maximum service to God and others. Where before, I was incapable of helping anyone. I was completely selfish and self-centered to the extreme where that was a compliment. If they said you're selfish, I looked at it as a compliment because I was so far gone. Every cent that came in was spent on me. My wife never got an ounce of child support when we were together, or I just started paying it because I have to. That's part of the amends process. I never gave her money for anything. I spent it all on me or drugs or gambling or women or strip clubs. Whatever made me feel good is what I did. Heroin's not the problem. Crack, cocaine, opiates, pills are not the problem. Yeah, there is problems with doctors feeding us opiates and not telling us you're going to get hooked on them physically and then mentally, and then you're going to start stealing from your mom and not paying your kids food when it needs to be paid for and stuff like that. Because when they gave me that script back in the day, he said, don't mix with alcohol. He didn't say you're going to lose everything. You're going to hurt everyone. You're going to get hooked on these and go on a run like no other. You're going to have a country song to the extreme. He just said don't mix it with alcohol. And that's part of the problem. But the overall picture is there is a lack of God in our community, in our state, and in our federal government. And the further we get from it, the worse it's going to get. If it ain't heroin, it's going to be something else another 5 years from now. They just came out with a pill that gets you just as high, if not higher than fentanyl, and they legalized it. And fentanyl is 100 times stronger than morphine. The pills was the big epidemic, and then they quit making them and feeding them to people so easily, so heroin became the epidemic. Crack was the epidemic in the 90s. It's real simple. The problem isn't drugs and alcohol. That is our solution to problems because we don't have that connection to God. That is the answer. That is the solution to our problem. Not these Narcans, methadones, Suboxones, and Subutex programs, because there's ways of manipulating those. There's ways of dropping clean. There's ways of using still on them. That's not the answer. That's a temporary Band-Aid on a permanent bullet wound that we have that must be fixed from the inside out. And that answer is the 12 steps, the program of recovery. I'm Chad Stone. I'm an alcoholic and a drug addict, but I'm recovered due to that process. Well, that'll pass.